Oh, going to do a bit more on Mortice key cutting. Gary asked me to show him a bit more about the machine. He's got a similar machine, but he's only ever used the actual cylinder side and not the Mortice. So this is for really demonstration purposes. So at this point at the Mortice side, at the moment, there's little bevels in there where this key, because it's a round key, will sit in and it holds it nice and flat and flush. Push it in, make sure it's nice and straight. You never ever want them like that. You want them as straight as you can get and nice and tight. Obviously this point here is where you're going to be tracing your key. So we won't turn it on, but you'll be tracing your key through that point there. And I'll try and move the camera around when we do that so you can see exactly what we're doing. So we're going through that point there. We're going to trace the key using this actual tracer and all the way through. It's an ERA for an ERA Fortress. So I'm walking around a tripod trying to get around everywhere. So this key is for this Fortress lock. It's a bit more complicated beating than the last time. As you can see on the key, you've got 7 cuts. There's actually only 5 levers in there. Reason for that is when the bolt's on the left, because the key is the lock is reversible, so you can obviously the bolt on the left, if you turn it around, the bolt on the right as well. So you're not cutting 5 times, you need to cut 7. And one I've cut earlier, and I'll explain a bit more detail. So the bolt's on the actual left now at the moment. The first lever is going to be right there at the front. So we're going to be going through. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one's there. These 2 are actually hidden back behind the bolt, but when you turn it round, they actually repeat itself. So on this particular cut, we've got a 1, a 2 cut, then a 3 cut, then we're dropping down to a 6, and then this last one here again is a 3, and then again that's going to be a 2 and then a 1. They just repeat themselves, yeah, but there's 2 extra cuts for the reason these locks are reversible, both for left and right mounted. But as you know, when the bolt's on the left, the first lever is right there at the front, and when the bolt's on the right, you've actually got the bolt stump first, and then your levers are behind that, and your back lever there is going to be sticking right in that case again. So there's that little gap. That's why these keys have 7 cuts and not 5. And that's my briefest explanation of that. So when you cut it, you actually reproduce a sort of mirror copy image of itself when you're going through. So again, 1 cut, 2 cut, 3 cut, drop down to 6, back down to a 3, a 2, and then a 1. It steps in and out. So that's what we're going to cut. Yeah, they repeat themselves, yeah. So you can see these are both the same, they're both the same, they're both the same, and that one at the bottom there is the same. So this is the way the lock actually works. The middle one's always going to sit in the middle, this particular lock. So things to talk about first. Gary asked me about the interchangeable of these actual parts that hold the key. So if you undo that, you can actually lift these up and rotate the whole lot round. So you can either cut them on the side or all the way around. Now this point here, it's flat. There's no beveled half moon edges in there, and that's designed for when you're cutting these sort of keys. Okay, because on the cylinder side it actually cuts in at an angle. On this side it actually cuts straight cuts, so these flat keys would sit on that flat plate there, and you'd use these stops to cut that key. You've reversed both of them, so they're both flat and not beveled, and that's what that's for. So okay, so you can cut other keys on here. Again, as I said before, you can cut ablo keys if you get special jig, and there's quite a few different ways you can cut just on this very basic machine. There is quite a lot of machines that look like this machine with lots of different names, so but they are all very basic. This is a dual machine. This one's SKS, but there's loads and loads of companies do loads and loads of different sorts. Right, so let's have a look at another thing. Right, so we want to cut a key for this. By count, okay. Now I've got, it's not an original, it's an ERA Fortress 5 gauge, it's a JMA one, but you do notice with the actual copy blanks that they're tight in the case. Okay, so the reason for that is they're slightly oversized, and you're going to take a little bit off the edge so it fits flush in between the gap of the case. They're not exactly the same size, so you could cut the key, and I'll show you in a minute, but if you didn't shave off the edges, so the key wouldn't work properly. So we're going to go through that process. So first of all, I need to rotate that bugger back round. If it's on the flat side, I don't want to be able to cut Mortice with a little bevel edge. So I'm going to drop him in there, make sure he's in properly. We're going to get our Mortice key. So it's on the tray, so we'll make sure it's all the way in. We'll make sure it's not like that, it's nice and straight. And it pays a little bit just to mess them out a little bit with it to get them as straight as you can, nice and tight. On the second side, we're going to be using this pot here. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to check to make sure it's in the right position. Right, slightly off a little bit, so it's worth having a little mess around and getting them just exactly where you want them. Other thing I always check, the blade's not running at the moment, but I'll try and get this a little bit closer so you can see, and down there, and a little bit closer. Right then, so what I always tend to do, so there's my tracer here over this side here, so I'll just turn that a little bit so you can see. This makes sense. So now this handle's in the way, let's do it this side first. I make sure that blade, I can touch the blade and make sure what sort of a gap. Now there's a fair bit of gap on this opposite side here. I'll move the camera around so you can see a little bit more. Okay, I've done my best with trying to get the angles. Now, I said the key slightly, the other key is rubbing against the blade, but you can see that tiny little gap there. That's the difference in the size. It's not quite flush against that. There's probably about a mil or half a mil difference, but you go on the other side, so I can put on, I'm on the other side of the blade and it's perfect. See, it just touches perfect. On this side there's a gap, so you're gonna have to allow for that when you're going to cut your key, because that's the part you're going to need to cut off as well as the bitting. You're going to cut through all of that. Now if I can show you, there's the stop, so it won't let you, it'll stop on there, you can adjust them, and it won't let you. There's the blade. It looks really close, but the blade will never cut into the actual part that's clamping the key down. It is about a tenth of a mil, but it's not touching it, so you're never ever going to get, you're never going to push it far enough, because that stop's going to stop you. Right, I'll try and rearrange the position. I know it's a bit of a dodgy camera angle, but that's the best way I could show you. So one side is actually larger than the other one. It can throw you out sometimes, so I'll change the camera angle around again. It's cut now. We know that one side we're going to have to shave a bit off, but the keys are straight as much as we can get. They're nice and tight. We've got our goggles on. We've got a screen you could use to stop the swarf if we wanted to. Right, so remember, you're not dragging it across like you are on the cylinder. It's just push little micro movements, and you're watching this part more than that part. Okay, that's a very important. You don't trace it on this side, you just do little micro movements. It'll only let you cut where it can cut, because it's copying exactly what's on that actual key. So we'll turn it on. It's a nice and quiet machine, and then we're just going to go little tiny movement. So there you go, that's our one cut. It's next to nothing. That's two. Sometimes you get these little tiny little micro bits there, you just come through. That's two. That's 1, 2 and 3 there, sorry. Now we've got almost there. A little bit more. 6 is quite a big cut. We've got little movements across. We're back on our 3. Back on our 2. You can see the way the key's starting to look. And then back on our 1. Now if you look at that key, you can see the difference now. One side looks a bit fatter than the other one. That one there is quite small against this other one. I'll just finish one more cut off this side and I'll show you. I'll take it out before we finish the side off. You'll get this sort of effect. See, look, that is a lot thinner than that side. It's going to indicate, yeah, that's where all that meat we need to remove, because that won't work like that. It looks a bit lopsided. For the reason is that the blanks are slightly oversized. So we're going to drop it back in. Make sure it's nice and tight. And we're going to sort it out. I'm going to make it, that's it, it'll only cut exactly what's on that trace. So we're just going to go through, make sure we've got every last cut there. Not micro movement. There we go. See, it's a lot more even now. You get a file in there, you can, or we can use the old buffing wheel there. Let's move this out of the way so you can see a little bit more. Okay, so the proof is in the pudding, as they say. If we didn't cut that side off, it wouldn't have fitted in properly. You can see where I've taken that meat off. And so I hope that helps Gary and other people that watch the video. You have got a mortise machine and you're just getting into it. Just trying to understand what's going on as you're cutting it. Remember, always be really careful because those blades are lethal. The other things you can do, I'm not sure if you know that. Let's recenter this camera a little bit and I'll show you. So we cut the key. It works just as good as the actual original. Both sides cut nice and clean. So what else can you do? Well, you can. Let me have a look. I don't think it's, yeah. You can buy a whole new pack with keys in. So if you're trying to save a few quid and you don't want to change your lock, because this one's looking on brand new, or you'd lost the key or whatever, you can take it out and put a new pack of levers in it with some new keys, and you've still got the lock. This is a hell of a lot cheaper than buying all of that. So that's one way of doing it. Some people have these for when they're moving properties and whatnot, and just take a set of these and just drop it in there, so they've got a different key to the door without having to have a big expenditure of changing the full lock. So yeah, you can buy packs of levers with keys in. Great again if you want to do a bit more different picking, but you don't want to, you haven't got a massive amount of room to keep all these locks. You can buy packs of levers, and again, as I said before, you can rearrange them as well. But if you want to work in lock, you can do that as well. So you buy packs. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes for all different sorts of locks. They come in little packs like this. And if you're doing a bit of recycling and you're out in the field and you come across a lock that's in pretty good nick but no key, you can drop a new pack in there, and there you go, good to go. You got another lock, fully functioning brand new lock. A long time ago, a good friend of mine, Gav, did cut me these gauge keys. So you can get code key coders, so actual cut by code, But you can make yourself a set of gauges by cutting all the cuts. You know, you need 2 different orientations because they're not always going to be in the same place, so they're going to have to be slightly different in odds and even places, but you can do that. And that's another thing by learning about codes, because after a while, when you spend a lot of time with these keys, you start to understand the heights. You know, when it's quite a high one, you know that's going to be a 1, and then a 2, it's just slightly down, and then a 3, and then quite a deep one. A lot deeper, it's more than 1 cut down, so that's 2 cuts down. So you say, oh, it's a 6, and you work your way through it. You can sort of decipher them over time of what these actually mean, these actual heights. You can get your head around it slightly, and you get a good guess of what they are before you even get going. So you think, oh yeah, okay, then, yeah, 1, 2, 3s, 4s and 5s a bit more difficult to have a look at, but yeah, you can start to read the keys and see them as numbers and not just keys. So yeah, I hope that helps somebody to understand a bit more about Mortice cutting. And Gary, I hope that helped. So you know, you've got a few more uses with that machine. It's not just a cylinder and mortice machine. Right, we'll set up next and we'll cut a cylinder key, and I'll show you the difference, the way that works. Okay, we're going to have a look at cylinder keys. Yeah, Euros, cylinders, doesn't matter which way they are orientated, the keys are going to be the same, as long as you get the right blanks for the locks. Okay, that's very important. There is more scope with using different blanks, but obviously you can get little key gauges so you can work out the orientation of the key. See that bends and grooves? You're trying to find a key that matches that with the right height, so those grooves have actually got to fit into the lock. So it's a pericentric keyway, so you've got to get a right key that fits in the right size lock. That's long enough to get all the pins. So you can mix and match a little bit more with Euros than you can so much with Mortice. But yeah, so for this demonstration, we're just going to use a Versa, and we're going to use a Versa blank. So, blank key. Obviously now, original Versa lock, it says it on the lock there, you can't go wrong. Versa blank. Obviously it's not going to work, is it? Because it's just a blank. We've got to put all those cuts in it. Remember, this cuts at an angle, not straight like the Mortice. So those V-shaped cuts, that's the difference. That's why you can never use that blade to cut Mortice keys, because it's cutting at a V. So we're going to set this up. Again, this is your tracer side. I adjusted it last time because it was slightly out. It's little adjustments on there. You keep testing it the same way as you calibrate the actual Mortice side. You can adjust that in and out slightly, and as long as it's just kissing the actual chrome on the key, so the top of there, it's just kissing there. You know you're going to get a good cut, but we'll find out if it's set right in a moment. So we're going to pop these 2 in here, and I'm no expert at cutting keys, nowhere near. So we need to put back a little bit. So we use this guide. Mortice got a bit more of a guide on these, so you've got a bit more scope. Remember, this is a semi-automatic machine, so we're going to get that guide there, and we want to take this one back a little bit. So we're going to get these guides both on that shoulder. We're going to make sure it's exactly where it needs to be. That's really, really important. So it's right on that shoulder there. It's nice and flat, and there's no gap. I don't want a gap on it. I want it to be cut exactly the same way. So I'm always going to spend a little bit more time making sure I'm sitting right on that shoulder. Now, there is another way you can do it. So we'll change this to around here. You can use the tip of the key and your guide. See on there? It's difficult to see. You can use the tip of my key on that guide. That's if you can't quite get it in the right place or using the wrong sort of blank. You can do a tip to tip and see how much gap is in there. Only slight. But for this purpose, we're going to use, that's it, make sure it's in. We're going to use this actual guide here to make sure we're both on the shoulder correctly. So it's nice and flat. We're happy with that so far. Okay, now this is a little bit different on this way. So I'll start cutting, but basically I'm going to start from the shoulder. I'll get as close in as I can for you, so you can see. So it's semi-automatic. So basically all I've got to do is push down. I'm lifting this up and I'm rotating this wheel on the one side, and I can actually drag the blade across the bitting with a little bit of pressure, pushing up. And it will follow it all the way through, as you can hear. It's a lot easier to cut keys, cylinder keys, than it is Mortice, I think. Because all it is just pressure and me moving that wheel, which moves this carriage across, which follows the pattern exactly of that key. As you can hear, there's no noise now, it's quiet. It's traced it. Okay. So the machine off, we're going to move around here a little bit. Same principle again. Make sure it's not running. At the moment, like that, it's quite burred up in it. So you want to get rid of all those burrs, really. You don't want none of that going in the lock. You see this stuff gets everywhere. So, same again. And the proof in the pudding is it going to work? Yeah, it's calibrated perfectly. The slightest not catching. So you know, it's a dead easy process, cutting cylinder keys. You know, it works perfect. I hope that helps. So I'm no expert, this is more for demonstration purposes, but the difference of using a dual machine. Everybody stay safe and stay well, and I'll see you soon. Ta-ra.